So I called out Loopmakers for using uncleared samples and sending them out as though they created them. And I got exposed for doing the same thing. Except there's a twist. Isn't there always a twist? I tweeted a short video of me getting sent loops, and one of the loops was an uncleared sample from a 90s R&B song. This is something that I've spoken about before. It's not a practice that I support. However, I feel like I owe an apology to the producer who sent me that email, because in the video, it was an accident. It wasn't my intention. I did not block his name out. And I think the end result of that was the young man getting some unnecessary criticism. I certainly could have spoken about what was going on without including his name in the video. I'm absolutely not a stranger to sampling. I have a video explaining how on my very first major placement ever, it was a song on an album that went platinum. I used a sample in the beat and I lost all equity in the underlying composition, and the royalties that I would have gotten on the master side got eaten up by a bunch of stuff that they charge against your accounts if in terms of recoupment, but especially sample clearance. That was at least $10,000 against me. But because the person I sampled took all of the underlying composition ownership, that means no performance royalties, that means no mechanical royalties, that means no mechanical license, period. Nothing from sync, no micro sync royalties, nothing from anywhere. It's not like I stopped sampling after that. I've sampled many times after that, and unfortunately, in most cases, the same thing happened. I'm going to talk about the whole rodeo situation in an upcoming video. And not all situations are like this, where you sample and you lose everything. But we know of some pretty awful situations, such as even the Nick Mira Juice WRLD Lucid Dream situation. He didn't even sample Sting, and Sting took everything on the underlying composition side. I also stand firmly on this notion that if you're making beats and you want to do this as a career, you should understand the business as much as you can to protect yourself and the people you work with. I'm not telling you never to sample, but I have a lot of experience in sampling. I have a lot of experience in replaying samples or avoiding sample clearance by creating original samples. They sound like samples. They might feel like samples, but they're original compositions that I created either by myself or with my fellow musicians, instrumentalists, producers. For example, Static Selector talked about this. It was on a Wiz Khalifa record. The people who he sampled originally wanted $80,000 to clear that sample. So that's where my team, the Vintage Vandals, stepped in and created an entirely new composition for him to sample to make a beat for Wiz Khalifa that fit what they already had recorded, and that saved them $80,000. Either there are people who freak out on this side and they're like, I'm never gonna sample again, or there are people on this side who are like, fuck you, Payne, we don't give a fuck what you gotta say about this stuff. I feel like there's a place in the middle where you can sample and you can understand exactly what you're doing and how it may affect you. My favorite hip-hop beats of all time are sample based. Also, I'm a loop maker, so I'm neither anti-sample or anti-loop. Now, there are a lot of people who are anti-loop, and there are a lot of people who are anti-sample nowadays. It's really weird. You ask them, do you just hate hip hop? Well, no, back in the day, people would dig deep. They weren't sampling the same thing over and over again, like the way these new school Fruity Loops producers are. But I find it absolutely hilarious that people claim sampling back in the day was more original than sampling today. It was newer, but to say that people didn't use the same sample over and over again, kind of curious. James Brown, Funky Drummer, dropped in 1970. Probably the most used, most sampled song in hip hop, and not just hip hop, in music in all times. Who Sampled claims this was sampled in 1,784 songs. Some of the biggest ones, as you can see, are listed right at the top. And people will say back then music was way the Powerpuff Girls theme music. A lot of people will say music was way more original. Production was way more original back then. We didn't even notice, I don't think, that this was happening, that this drum break was being sampled again and again. This got sampled so many times. It likely generated hundreds of millions of dollars from the royalties made off of these new iterations of the track. Unfortunately, the drummer didn't get paid so the guy who actually, his name is Clyde Stubblefield, rest in peace. He didn't get paid anything. He's the one who played the drums. Why didn't he get paid a cent? Because he was treated as a session player and therefore didn't get any equity, aka ownership, in the underlying composition. He didn't get anything. That means no writer's share, no publisher's share. And so when he got sampled and the sample made millions of dollars. He didn't get a cent. And it's really sad when you consider that nowadays some recording artists, some rappers that try to buy beats from you will try to buy them as a buyout and put you in the same position as Clyde Stubblefield to make $0 off of a track that you created. Anyway, back to loops. I've sampled a lot. I've lost my equity in these songs. I don't like that. You shouldn't want that for yourself either. Here's what happened. The producer community saw how difficult sampling was. I had an interview with Deborah Manis Gardner. In one of her previous interviews, she talked about how incredibly hard it is to clear samples. She runs DMG clearances. She's talked about literally visiting graveyards to try to track down sample owners to clear samples, and having budgets of hundreds of thousands of dollars to clear samples. And as we know, some sample rights owners won't even clear samples. The big case between Tracy Chapman and Nicki Minaj was a big deal. A lot of us knew about that. Tracy Chapman would not clear the sample for Nicki Minaj's song, so the song never came out. So the producer community saw all of these problems with sampling, and they responded. You had people early on like Frank Dukes and G. Coop, who started creating original music that sounded like the music they loved sampling. Then they started sending it out to their friends. I remember Frank Dukes used to send me zip files full of samples that he created. And it was new. I'll be honest, I didn't quite understand what he was doing. Now I'm doing the same thing. And this was amazing, because if you sampled Frank Dukes or you sampled G. Coop, you no longer had to go through labels and publishing entities and various writers to clear that sample, and you didn't have to sit there and wonder whether or not your track would actually get cleared by the sample creator. You knew it was going to get cleared because it was G. Coop. That's the whole reason he made the loops and sent them to you. The whole point of making samples for producers is to make the process easier. It's to remove all of the doubt. It's to remove all of the extra expenses and extra hassle, because sampling existing songs can cause problems. So then why is it that loop and sample makers are sending me uncleared samples that they didn't create? I think it's a mixture of just general ignorance and then also people not really caring. Now, a lot of people just want to get a placement. As long as they get credit, they might not care about what position they put their peers in, what position they put themselves in. I guess I don't understand why anyone would send these out, because all you're doing is putting your peers in a position of uncertainty, potential legal ramifications. If I get a placement with a sample that I don't know the source of, suddenly I have to double back to the sample creator and hope that they get back to me with the information, and then I hope that whoever they sampled is actually going to be reasonable and allow the sample to be cleared. They probably will, but you never know. I've made the mistake. This is why I'm speaking on this. This is because I don't want people to make mistakes. I've made many of these mistakes. This is why I'm sharing this information. I used to, and I wouldn't lie about this and say, hey, I made this. I would, on Unfinished Fridays on my Facebook page, I would just drop little loops here and there. Sometimes I would say, this is just a sample that I chopped up, do something cool with it. And that happened to me. I got a placement with it from some other producer that used it. And when I was like, oh man, that's from like 10 years ago, I don't know the sample source, that almost ruined the placement. Thank God at that time I had been making samples, so I just made something original that fit. Turned out to be a hit song. But me fucking around with these uncleared samples, I could have ruined that entire situation. And then none of the co-producers, not the artists, none of us would have gotten a hit record. None of us would have gotten any of the money. The fans would have suffered. It just would have been a really bad situation. So that's why nowadays I love the fact that I can work with sample creators like Kavi, like Dilly, like Moonbird, like Dope Boys. Their original samples sound like something I would have recorded off of vinyl. Their terms are clear. The percentages that they want are clear. The label doesn't have to deal with sample clearance, so they don't charge money against my royalties. And we just share equity in the underlying composition. I'm not going to lose all my equity in the record, so I still get paid. I'm going to get my royalties. I'm going to get my performance royalties, my mechanical royalties. If the song gets synchronized, then I get a piece of that too. This is what it should be like. People actually still assume that I'm making beats with samples when I upload tracks like this. You set me free. When in reality, I'm just using a sample that Kavi emailed to me. And yes, Kavi and I have spoken. He asked if he could send me samples. I said absolutely. So it wasn't just like a random thing where he scraped my email off of Twitter and just started flooding me with MP3s. Exactly what my tweet was that went crazy. This is the one I apologized for at the beginning because I got called out for doing the same thing and being a hypocrite. So I want to address that. Here we go again. Someone sending me loops saying that they made them, talking about all rights reserved. Oh my God. Check out this sample. And it sounds cool. Sounds dope. Cool. Oh, wait. Okay, I don't want to get copyright claimed, but it was a sample from Immature. So it sounded dope. I'm not taking away from the talent of people who sample. I just feel like I could sample Immature. I don't need someone else to do it for me and like expect credit for it. It just doesn't make sense to me. And the person sending out uncleared samples is putting themselves in jeopardy too, because there's no information in the file name of the sample source. There never is. And so if someone gets a placement with that track, and let's say the rapper puts it out unknowingly because they don't know there's a sample in it because the producer didn't know either, suddenly the person who owns the sample has a whole bunch of leverage. This happens all the time. And so no one wins, you know, like granted that the project comes out eventually once they get it cleared, hopefully they get it cleared. It's likely that they will lose all of their writers and publishers share. So they'll get in advance. I don't think it's a bad thing, but trust me, I've been in that position. It's heartbreaking to find out that this track that you created and you have this incredible moment, you don't own any percentage of. So I got checked for being a hypocrite here with that video, among other things. My man Pasta here says, I don't see an issue with it. The title says it's sampled. Lots of major songs are produced by a producer sending another producer a sample chop. Maybe they are. I feel like that's something that you should make clear. Plus, you have rights reserved on your emails, and you also send out sample chops. I said, I do. Show me. He tells me, I have a loop called 2 Million Up. That's a Dennis Edwards sample. Hey, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So he has proof that I'm spreading anti-loopmaker propaganda because I hate loopmakers. He's reposting this video that was created by Nash, and I'm going to show you. This is Nash exposing me.
Here we go again. Another beat folder talking about all rights reserved. Oh my God, let's see what they're talking about. Okay, cool, yeah. Wait a second.
Listen, man, I'm sure Nash is sick of my shit. I assume that's why he made that video, but that is hilarious. I don't want to explain the joke, but okay, like he just mimicked what I said exactly in my video about loop makers and turned it around on me as a beat maker who samples with like he did a fake he sent a fake email to himself from, you know, a DJ Payne account. So the plot twist was that wasn't real. I don't do that. Again, this is just my opinion. Tell me if I'm wrong. I believe that if you're a loop and sample maker who sends original loops and samples to producers, they should be ones that you created, not ones that you've stolen from black music of the past or whatever the source is. It's just going to create problems. It's going to create problems for you. It's going to create problems for the people who are receiving those and potentially making beats with them and maybe getting them placed with artists without actually knowing the source. I've been in these situations. It sucks, but I've also been in situations where I've salvaged the placement by creating original versions of these samples and not only saving my own life, but saving the song and saving the project. Also, the loop and sample making game is, I hate to use this word, it's getting saturated in the sense that there's competition and there are a lot of people who make amazing samples. You can go on Splice and find amazing samples. You can go on the Sample Lab and find amazing samples. You can buy samples from Drum Broker, from the Rucker Collective. Those samples are amazing. You can get samples from Kingsway that are amazing. And so the people who are trying to create that vintage sound simply by just sending uncleared sample chops out are at a disadvantage, because why would somebody select a sample that they are going to lose all of their equity by using over an equally good sample that's 100% original that they feel safe using and that they just have to give a small percentage to the sample creators on? Something to think about as you continue on your beat making journey. Appreciate you tuning in. Much success to you. Peace.